Great. It's the David Ed Podcast, part 2 with Mr. John Patrick Shanley.
Yes.
We are very excited for this. We had a lot of great feedback on part 1. And
good.
I wanted to begin with a general question that a lot of...
Can I start?
Oh, you start, Dave, that I won't. Great, in the moment.
It's very hot today, John. It's in the high 80s. How do you feel about the heat?
Great question.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I tried to meet the day where it is.
Okay.
And rather than fight the climate, I go with it, you know.
Right.
So when it gets hot, I slow down. When it gets cold, I speed up.
All right.
Wow.
Good answer.
Wow. That was brilliant. Jesus Christ. Because of that, because you're so in the moment, I'm foregoing my initial question now.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
No, it's great because you're inspiring me.
Yeah.
John, in another interview that I saw when I did some research, you said when you were 12 years of age, you sensed that the world was about to change or coming to an end, something like that. How do you feel about the world right now, if I may ask?
I think that it's a really, it's a time that makes an artist stop making art and just take in what's going on, because the density of event at this time is sufficient where whatever you do after this is going to be colored by this. So it would be, unless, you know, you're picking out something on a guitar and riffing, it's time to just sort of be in the passive role of gathering information.
Right, like be the observer kind of thing? Just observe?
Yeah.
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 Cool, yeah. Well, speaking of that, the artist, a lot of writer friends ask me to ask you this question, which is probably a general question that you get asked a lot. Do you have a writing process? Are you a 9-to-5 writer, or what is your process? Or do you have it, or is it different every time with each project?
There's things about it that are different every time. There are things that are the same, and there's some things that have changed gradually over time. So when I started out, when I got serious about being a writer, I was a writer for many years before I got serious. And after I got out of the Marines, I got serious. And so every morning I would get up at 5 o'clock and write for 3 hours. And then I would do other things. You know, I'd go out and write. Then I'd go out and run 3 miles. And then I would start my day. And I did that for quite a while. And that I cannot recommend strongly enough. No one calls, no one writes, no one, you know, it's a very good time to write. And then, you know, once I had that discipline in my bones, I was able to do a lot of different things, because writing is basically concentration.
Right.
It is staring at a spot on the wall and seeing things that aren't there and hearing people talk who aren't there.
Right.
It's not the same as being a medium. A lot of young writers who have some gifts channel, you know, they just could sit down and they start writing. And I have that, and I still have that. I can just sit down and start writing, but it will not have structure that it requires in order to be something that's really usable for me. So I spend a lot of time thinking about structure.
Right.
And that's part of the process.
And do you need to be in a quiet space? Because it seems to be all the rage these days, before COVID anyway, where like a lot of writers, screenwriters will be like in Starbucks or whatever, you know, like would you do that kind of thing, or do you need your private space?
Well, I mean, I suppose I could write in Starbucks. It's sort of like being even more alone. Being in Starbucks is like being more alone.
Yes.
when you're alone, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, in the sense that art is selection, the fact that you would choose to be in a chain restaurant, you already have a problem.
Right.
You need to choose a place. Now, it's true, though, that writers like to, and it's very understandable, they like to have a lot of things on automatic pilot so they can think about what they're doing. So they know They know what time they're getting up. They know what they're having for breakfast. They have a whole routine.
Right.
And that's understandable. But I think that we can probably do better than Starbucks.
Sure,
Yes.
absolutely.
What do you think of the current upheavals in the United States?
Well, it's been a long time coming.
Right.
Right.
And, the repetitive blows to this society have, over time, led to fractures that then lead to fissures that then lead to disunion. And the same struggle that I saw in the Bronx in the late 60s is exactly what's going on now. It's the same thing.
Right.
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 But, as many people have said, people are now getting tired of it.
Yes.
And it's also, as the old folk saying goes, the new wine is bursting the old bottles, that the old structures need to be exploded to some degree in order for new things to be born. I am personally an institutionalist. So I don't like to see any institution go out of business if it's possible to modify and improve it.
Right.
Because starting over again, it always starts in blood.
Yeah.
So, the idea of significant revolution, I don't hope for it.
Right.
Incremental change, but with the occasional real growth spurt.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's no question that we're in a huge moment, but the planet, both environmentally, socially, informationally, is under enormous stress.
Yeah.
And people are really feeling that. And then this lockdown that happened, pretty much, a worldwide, to some degree, lockdown, forced people into a period of contemplation about what the quality of their lives was and is. And I think it built up a certain kind of positive pressure, the kind of pressure that maybe a monk has before spiritual awakening, rather than simply an explosion. Because what's been happening in the streets is, to my mind, not really an explosion.
Mhm.
The resistance is explosive. The police are explosive.
Right.
But the people on the street, they're not all about just getting jazzed and inflaming their senses and trashing stuff.
Mhm.
They are sick of the way things are, and they want things to change. And to that degree, this is a sober expression, and I like that a lot.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, now that we're kind of on this, before we get back to the writing, there's a question that we've been asking a lot of guests recently regarding the lockdown and the virus. The vaccine, the question of taking a vaccine, would you take a vaccine or would you not take a vaccine? Like, do you have an opinion on the vaccine? A vaccine?
Yes, I would take a vaccine. Yes, I would take a vaccine. I think that, the anti-vax movement is just another phase
Right.
of the anti-intellectualism that is basically anti-enlightenment and anti-Isaac Newton. And I want no part of it. It is it's militant ignorance.
Very good.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very beautifully put.
Yeah.
Okay. We left off
Yeah.
the last.
I got us off track.
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
we left off the last interview, I think, just in and around the time of just before you wrote what is widely considered to be a masterpiece, Doubt.
Doubt, yes.
So maybe you could speak to us a bit about the origins of that piece.
Well, it was during the run-up to the invasion of Iraq,
Wow.
which was being justified by the existence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And all of the confident and articulate people on television were saying, absolutely, they've got weapons of mass destruction. And all of the people were sort of going like, gee, I'm not really sure that they do. They were just like, get out of my way. You're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. And it's like that Auden poem about people who are, Yeats did the better one. Yeah, the second coming with, that the people full of passionate intensity are bad news. And the people who are more considered and hesitant appear to be weak. And it reminded me of an earlier time in my life when I was in the Bronx and I was going to a church school in what appeared to be a time that was always going to be like it was then. And the things, the values that were being taught, the way things were being presented to us, the faith in government and the faith in faith of organized religion, and all of that was being presented to me as a child as eternal was about to be swept away.
Right.
And I had an intimation that was the case. When I was in the Bronx, I knew it was all going to end. And so I spent the last 4 or 5 years of my time in the Bronx saying goodbye with some love and some sadness that everything that had given solidity, stability to my existence was going to be swept away. And then I left. And then shortly after I left, the Bronx, even while I was there, the Bronx burst into flames. And large parts of it were burned to the ground. And there was enormous white flight. And everything changed. Everything changed. The nuns all took off their habits and threw them on the floor and walked away. It was like, what? And the church scandals, of course, which were being perpetrated at that time, but not openly spoken of at that time, came to light later. And I was like, all of these things remind me of each other. And I always had in a drawer in my mind these particular order of nuns that wore these peculiar bonnets, and who had been my teachers. And I always thought, well, someday I'll obviously write a play about that because it's a good costume. And I am way into costumes. I think that their value in the world is far underrated. I like to see the milkmen dressed in white and the street conductors dressed sort of in a semi-military way, and the doormen dressed like emperors and viziers. And I think all of that actually helps society to maintain a healthy exoticism. Yes. And also that people have dignity. These uniforms make people feel like they know their place in the world and other people know how to treat them. Right. And, we've had this kind of external universality going on where like everybody's wearing sneakers and jeans. Yeah. So Mark Zuckerberg is in like a t-shirt and jeans or whatever. Right. And when, or in days of old, he'd be sitting on a golden throne with, women painting his toenails.
Yeah. That might actually happen.
Yeah. which would help you to know how to talk to him, or shoot him, or whatever you want to do with the guy. But so that, I knew that the nuns were, highly identifiable as a time and a place and a point of view. And I knew it really well. I'd been with them for 8 years and it was in my bones. And I knew, I said about the play after I wrote it, I said, it's the first play I've written. I'm not in the play.
Right.
And the closest thing I am in the play is I'm the space created by the intersection of these characters. I'm doubt. That's what I am. I always have been. You know? And people who say they know everything and they are completely sure about what should be done and all of this stuff, I have that affect. You know, I can be very definite in my style, which is something that I think cultivated. But my style, my real style and substance is, I am certain, I am doubtful.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
And that is the solid real estate on which I stand, and that's the real estate that I'm describing in the play.
Right. Right. And did you like bang that out quite quickly? Did you write it fast? Was it like a few weeks and boom?
Yeah. It didn't take long to write. And then we went into rehearsal, and the first read through of the play, I'm like, oh, the scene with Mrs. Muller is so strong that the scene following it, the confrontation between Sister Aloysius and Father Flynn, needs another turn in it. And so I put in 2 more turns in it to give the argument sufficient extent to get to the size that it could stand after the scene with Mrs. Muller.
Right. And that went straight to Broadway, right? Did it with Doug Hughes?
No, we started off Broadway,
Broadway. Yeah.
at Manhattan Theater Club at City Center.
Right.
And I did a reading of the play. I did a reading of the play with Glenn Close.
Oh, wow.
And she did that movie start thing where she did nothing with 3/4 of the play. And then once in a while, she'd just do one brilliant line. So she was sort of saying, if I chose to do this,
yeah,
it would all be like this. But I'm not there yet. And she didn't end up doing it.
Okay.
But after the reading of the play, my agent came over. There's only like 10 people there. William Goldman was there, in fact. And after the reading of the play, my agent came over to me and congratulated me. And I said, thanks. I said, I was just tense through the entire play, and I'm still tense. Is that good?
Right. Yeah.
Is that what is it good? I mean, is that why I go to the theater, is so that I can be made tense and stay tense? And he said, yes, you know, because he's my agent. But it was a peculiar, so in some sense, the play felt alien to me and very familiar at the same time. I didn't know exactly what I was doing with the play. I just.
Mm-hmm. And did you anticipate it? Did you have any idea it would be so successful?
Apparently, I told somebody that I thought I'd win the Pulitzer for it.
Oh, wow.
While I was writing it. But I have no recollection of saying that, nor do I have any recollection of thinking, oh, this is good. I just wrote it. I had no thoughts, which is when you're in the zone.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Could we talk a bit about the film version of it? And also, like, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on directing your own words, your own work in general. Like, apparently, I read somewhere that Pinter apparently said when he was directing his own stuff, oh, what I think the writer meant there was, he would have these moments where he'd step outside of himself. Like, would you do similar things? Can you step back, or do you have once it's written, when you're talking to the actors, it's like, it needs to be like this? Or?
Oh, I have, for the most part, I have no idea how things should be done.
Interesting.
I hire really good actors and I let them do what they do.
Yes, right.
Cherry Jones came in with her performance to the first rehearsal.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
Brian F. O'Byrne, not far behind. All of them, all 4 actors they knew what they were doing.
Right.
And so I had virtually no input I checked the language. They asked me a couple of questions, but it was kind of a foregone conclusion. We all kind of knew what to do.
Right.
And we did our jobs and didn't have to get into anybody else's. When I direct a play or a film of mine, this is honestly true. I usually curse the writer and wish that the writer had thought a little bit more about what he was doing. And, try to figure out how to make what the writer did work.
Right.
Because my job as the director is to make it work, which is very different. It helps to, and people don't do this often enough. If you write a play, and if you're good at writing screenplay directions, get like 10, 15 people together and read it to them. And before you read it to them, say, I'm going to read it to you in a week. Then read it again, thinking, I'm going to read this out loud to people. And you'll start changing things right away. You'll start crossing shit out. It's like, you're saying like some brilliant actor will make, no, I've got to make it work. I don't know how to make that work. That's no good. And then that's really helped me on those occasions when I was asked to do that.
Right. We're really curious to know what it was like directing and working with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Meryl Streep in the movie version. I suppose especially Phil Hoffman
and Amy Adams.
And Amy Adams, of course. Yeah.
And Viola Davis.
And Viola Davis, excuse us. Yeah.
Nothing to sneeze at. Well, we rehearsed. And Viola wasn't there at the beginning of rehearsal. She was in something else. And so me and Phil and Amy started rehearsing. And Phil and Meryl had worked together a couple of times before. And so they already had a sick relationship. And then Amy came into the mix. And Amy was really nice. And Phil had no use for that. So, Amy would say, what do you think that means or whatever? And Phil would say, you just want to be liked.
Wow.
So he was, that's his thing, is about busting people, when he felt they were false. But in fact, I still am friends with Amy, and she's turned into a major star, and it's become very clear she's one of the best actors we have. So, but, she also had that about her, that she sort of had these like wide open blinking eyes, like, kick me. And so Phil kicked her a couple of times. And then, and he, somebody, I think Meryl, she said, I reread the play, and why did you cut this one line? And I don't remember what the line was. And I said, well, you want to say it? And she said, yeah. I said, all right, put it back in. And then she said, well, actually, there's one other line. And then she went to, I'm like, yeah, okay, put it in. Then Phil said, actually, I have a couple of, I'm like, all right, tell me what they are. He told me. So I'm like, okay, put it in. And then Amy said, I'd like to put this on. I said, no. Then Viola showed up. So Meryl, I remember Meryl was sort of lingering over by the donut table. And when I came over and I was looking for something to snack on, she sort of just looked up at the ceiling and said to nobody, I don't know what rehearsals are for.
Okay.
And then later, when we were doing audience discussions, those screenings they do for the Academy stuff, and I mentioned that. She said, I never said that. And Phil said, oh, yes, you did. And we had sort of a few things like that. I knew Phil for years before that. Right. But we weren't friends exactly. We were more than acquaintances. We'd been on vacation together, but he'd never made up his mind about me, and I didn't push it. I wasn't trying to win him over because of what happened to Amy, I had no interest in going there.
Right.
So then when we were shooting, so we rehearsed this one scene in the office when he goes to the blinds and he shuts them because it's too bright and she had opened them. So we were rehearsing that part of the scene, and I said, good, and he said, good. And I said, yeah, except for that. There's one, and he's like, where? And that's how he was. That's his,
Yeah.
And I said, well, when you go over to the window, it felt a little fudgy.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, and he like went over there. He like did different things, and we talked about different things. And then, he got to that point. But he was, I had to wait for him to ask me for help. I wasn't going to like jump into that Cucino.
Right.
And I liked Phil, and I had great sympathy for him because, I remember we set him up in this little, we shot a lot in this one building up at the college of Mount St. Vincent. And he would sit in that room and he would smoke cigarette after cigarette and stare out the window. And I came in one day and I said to him, how you doing? And he said, not so good. And I said, if acting was as painful for me as it is for you, I wouldn't do it.
Oh.
And what I didn't understand at that time was acting was the only thing that was saving his life,
Right.
that the pain was different than that. It was the pain of addiction. And I just didn't understand. And he didn't particularly correct me, And later on, we were on vacation at the beach, and I found him sitting down at the beach by himself in a beach chair. And I said, how you doing? He said, not too good. I'm going to have to go back to New York. I have to talk to somebody.
Right.
And that was around the time that it was right after he did Death of a Salesman. He for some reason, that play was, and of course it's about suicide. That was a play, he was not the same. After he did that play, he was not the same. I don't know, in other words, again, whether it really was anything to do with the play or simply that acting was no longer saving his life. I don't know which it was, but yeah. But a soulful guy, difficult to know.
Yeah.
Difficult to know. And he could be abrasive. He could be quite abrasive. He was okay with me, but I saw him be abrasive to other people, sometimes very impatient and abrupt and insulting. But it was like, me at my worst. In other words, if I hadn't slept in 2 days and, you kept asking me the same question over and over again, that kind of irritability people get when they're struggling with something they're not talking about.
Right.
Sure.
And what was it like working with Meryl Streep? She's such a celebrated actress.
Yeah.
Well, it was very nice. It was very good.
Yeah.
Her and Amy, they're always dressed in black from head to foot. And Meryl knitted every day. And I read the newspaper. I would read we'd sit in like a circle in between setups, and I'd be reading the New York Times, and Meryl would be knitting. And then after a couple of days, Amy took up knitting. So then now there's two women dressed in black across from me knitting, and I'm reading the paper. And I started to have fantasies that I was going to die. I was like, if the third woman shows up and starts knitting, I'm fucked.
Okay.
But it was, I was intentionally quiet because actors are, they're thinking over what they're going to do.
Sure.
That's their rehearsal. It's meditation. And if you're like, engaging them, you can do a little very light engagement, but you really want to give them their space to do their work. And so we got on well because I knew that.
Mhm.
I don't think Meryl ever asked for help.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. She never asked for help.
Did you adjust her at all in any scenes or offer adjustment?
No, I don't. I made her do something she didn't want to do, and that was like trying to get a goat on a truck.
What was it?
I wanted her to give me one forceful line reading on an exit line and cut your nails, and she did not want to do it. And I basically said, okay, we're just going to stay here until you do it, And so then she gave it to me. And then when I got to editing, I was like, yeah, she was right. It's no good.
Okay.
But other than that, no. I mean, looking at the film, there's one part where I wish that I had stepped in and gotten another take because it affected editing. In the confrontation scene between her and Phil, that she made a choice that broke the momentum of the scene. And it was a really interesting choice. And I liked the choice. But when I saw it in editing, I'm like, this is breaking the momentum of the scene. And I should have gotten the shot both ways. But that's it,
Yeah.
I think if you do a film and you don't have anything that you regret, you're probably not paying attention.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And was all the movie shot in New York?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we shot in fact, the College of Mount St. Vincent is in the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got in a, car picked me up every morning and took me to the Bronx. You think of the movie business as exotic, people in the south of France laughing. I ended up back in the fucking Bronx. My first film, I ended up in Queens.
Yeah.
Moonstruck, I ended up in Brooklyn and Manhattan. I never go anywhere. Then when they were doing Alive, Frank Marshall, who was directing that, he called me and said, come to the Glacier. And I'm like, what kind of invitation is that?
Yeah. Did anyone invite you to the Congo?
Well, yeah, no, they shot in Congo. They did a scout in Africa.
Okay.
That terrified the cameraman so much they never went back there. And they ended up shooting it in Costa Rica.
Right.
Yeah, and there's some stuff in San Francisco and LA.
Right. So after Doubt, what came then? Did you take a break or was it straight into another project?
I kept going back and forth between plays and films.
Right.
Yeah. And
could you talk a little bit? Sorry, could you talk a little bit about the difference between working in theater and film?
In film, you have a tremendous amount of support.
Right.
In theater, you go into a room and there's like 3 or 4 really frightened people in there, and they shut the door and you don't come out for 4 weeks. And it's really intense. And also in theater, there's a tradition in American theater of being completely unprepared. So when you go into that first rehearsal, people, they're not able to do what they're able to do at home. They are like, how do I walk across a room? They are like, what is English? What is the English language? And then you go and then you do a film, and the actors have been working and thinking about what they're going to do nonstop. They are so prepared. Right. And I think the time has come when, this school of acting that we're doing in New York, where, the actors show up, a clear tablet with no markings on it has got that, and they got to do some homework.
Brilliant. Wow. There you go. Yeah. That's it. That's a statement.
And what techniques are you referring to?
yeah, let's get specific.
I remember when I did Danny in the Deep Blue Sea with John Turturro. And I came into like the first rehearsal, and I happened to look at John's script, and he crossed out all the stage directions. And I said, John, I wrote those.
Yeah.
I'm here. You're crossing out what I wrote. Don't do that. Now I don't even. But I think the art of stage directions and screen directions is vastly underestimated.
Right.
That in film, really good screen directions let everybody know how to do the scene.
Wow.
And part of that, and you can say that, and then the person will write 3 pages of screen directions. That's not what I mean.
Right.
I mean, they find the really concise way to capture the ambiance of the scene, of the place, for the art director, for the production designer, and that the cameraman is inspired, if not directed, and that the director has a strong bite on what to do, what the tone of the scene is, that kind of
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Would you say an actor that crosses out stage directions, that's almost like an arrogant act? Would it be?
thing. No. He's, first of all, John.
I mean, not specifically John Turturro, but
John Turturro is a sweetheart now, and he was a sweetheart then.
Right.
But and he was doing what he got taught at the neighborhood playhouse. He had Sandy Meisner. And I understand. I was starting out, I thought my stage directions were really good. That doesn't mean that, I should have had all of them.
Yeah.
And also, I was very prone to putting in all capital letters things that I thought should be loud.
Right.
And so there was quite a few things in capital letters. I've tried to exercise restraint. In a way, I have felt many scripts I've written, I've thought the appropriate punctuation on every sentence in the script was an exclamation point.
Right.
But that, of course, is insane.
Yeah.
It tells you absolutely nothing.
Yes. Well, I feel like I kind of know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Like, after writing Doubt, which was so well received, did you ever feel any pressure to kind of like, oh, the next one has to be as successful and this kind of thing, and I need to, Well,
the pressure that I feel is get the next one on.
Okay.
They're gonna hate it. Let's get it over with.
Wow.
If they like it, surprise, surprise. It's never happened. They always hate the one after the one they love in my career.
Yeah.
And fine. So just let's get it out of the way.
Right.
Yeah.
So you
want to get back to work. You want to get back to work. After you get a lot of awards, you want to get back to work.
Right. I guess it keeps you grounded, and
Yeah.
If we could, do you want to?
No.
I'd love to fast forward a little bit, or a few years, to another kind of autobiographical piece, I believe, Prodigal Son, which I saw actually, and I really enjoyed. Which of course starred Timothy Chalamet. Could you talk a bit about that piece? It's about you as a teenager, right? And
it's about when I was 15, I was thrown out of all the schools in New York. Basically, I was thrown out of Catholic school, thrown out of public school, and I had no place left to go. And this school in New Hampshire, on top of a mountain with 55 boys in the whole school, gave me, for very fluky reasons, a 2-year scholarship to go there. And so I went. And when I got there, I was a lunatic. I had been in a very violent neighborhood for a long time. I was violent, and I had no idea what was actually going on. I was very well read. I read a tremendous amount, and I was very volatile, and had no idea who I was at all.
Wow.
And they kind of discovered fairly quickly when I got there that I had an unusual aptitude for literature, both for writing and for what I could read and talk about. And fortunately, I was basically taken under the wing of one of the faculty members, the head of the English department, who kind of protected me the whole time I was there. Now, it turned out that he was a child molester, major,
Right.
but never tried it with me. I don't know whether his radar told him it wouldn't go well. I don't know, but in any case, he didn't, which left me, in later years with the question, let's say you're a kid in Germany and you get a scholarship from Adolf Hitler, and you meet him and he gives you cake and he's really nice to you. And you say, well, Hitler was very nice to me,
Yeah.
But on some level, Hitler was very nice to me.
Right.
And so I had to metabolize that, and which created a lot of moral questions, interesting moral questions for me to wrestle with at my leisure.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those are in that play. But it was, I had a passion to be given everything I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just went to low power mode. To be given everything that I wanted, to be given all the awards and everything before I did anything.
Right.
I said, and if you do that, I will live up to the awards that you gave me.
Right.
Which is kind of an insane deal that you're trying to make.
Yeah.
And I was able to sort of get it. But that's what was going on. I must tell you, my phone is about to die.
Okay.
So this is the end of part 2 of our conversation with John Patrick Shanley.
Could we finish it off?
Can we finish it off in a few weeks, John? Please.
Oh, sure.
Thanks, John.
This will be my autobiography by the time.
Okay. Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Be well. Be well.
Have a good night.
Good night, John.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.